because I wasn't even thinking 2 days ahead yet, and all of a sudden it was like, what? It's tomorrow?
Right. But I did want to make sure that I at least got a discussion draft out for everybody to take a look at. So mission accomplished, I guess, in that regard. So good afternoon, and let's dive into the world of minimum maintenance roads. What we talked about at the last meeting of this group was creating an option. So it isn't mandatory for municipalities. There's no fiscal note and there's no home rule issue. It's an option that the municipality could suggest, or people who own property along a road, or are tenants or users of property along one of these discontinued or abandoned roads where there's a public easement that remains, could approach the town and say, could you bring it to town meeting? So that we have a minimum level of maintenance, so that I, as a homeowner, if I decide to sell, can say, well, yeah, until such time as the town meeting says no, we're going to get the road graded every year, and we're going to get big storms plowed, and we'll put in a culvert. It's just some minimum level of maintenance, or anything more that they agree to. The town would not get any liability as a result. It would be held like it would for public easement. It's not liable under the Highway Defect Act. It wouldn't be liable under the Tort Claims Act, so there'd be no penalty for putting a road in that classification. Again, it's subject to legislative body, town meeting approval. In a town that has a town council that has legislative authority, then the council would make the vote. But generally, we're talking about small towns and town meeting type votes. So the idea is to take the current 3105A, fix it the way we asked to have it done last year, to have private ways changed to public easements. That's not asking for too much. And then add to it this option that would allow for folks to approach the town to have this minimum level of maintenance. So I'm sure that I didn't get it all right, but I just wanted to at least get it down on paper so we'd have something to react to. I know Roberta has some comments, so let's start. Roberta, what do you think about all this?
Okay, well, my first comment is you have a neighbor of ours to thank for having come over and asked David if he could go someplace with him this afternoon, because otherwise he'd probably be in the background here steaming out his ears, because he knows that our town would never agree to the option. They have said, we will never maintain your road for you, in spite of the fact that they have taken on other roads in town, but they won't do this one because of hard feelings. And there are a lot of people who are going to run into that. If it's optional, the town is just going to laugh and say, ha, we're not doing that. Anything that's going to cost us money, we're not going to vote for. So, I would love to have some mandatory measure in it. On the other hand, I'm kind of stuck in the middle here, because I know that MMA will never approve of anything that is mandatory. And I'd like to get something in that might have a possibility of helping some of the people that I work with across the state. And this is at least getting a foot in the door. There were a couple of things that I noticed. There was one place where there was a one-word change. And at the moment, I can't remember where it is. At the intersection of each such public easement with a public way. That's kind of assuming that there is only one intersection of the public easement with a public way, and sometimes there are two ends of it. But if they're only maintaining one end, how do you post the other end, or do you post it in the middle? Or
how about we say at each intersection of such public easement with a public way?
Yeah, I thought of that, but the problem with that is, for example, where you've got a road that somebody's living quarter of a mile in on one end, and then there's a mile beyond that, and it comes out on the other end, and the town isn't going to maintain that other end at all. So do you put a sign at the end saying there's minimal maintenance when there isn't any? Or do you put the sign just beyond that person's house facing towards the part that isn't maintained at all? I just don't know exactly how to post that.
Well, you bring up an interesting question that I'm sure someone else will in a moment, and that is, how far down that public easement do you maintain? Because all we say is that they may ask the legislative body, this is in the fourth, fifth line, to provide a minimum level of year-round maintenance and repair for a public easement which serves as access to one or more year-round residences. It doesn't say and shall at least maintain up to the last year-round residence property.
And this is one of the things that we tried when we tried to put in our minimum maintenance legislation back a couple of years ago, which resulted in this committee getting formed because they couldn't agree on doing what we were asking for. We're trying to make a very specific set of circumstances so that towns wouldn't suddenly have a whole can of worms open. There'd be just maybe one road in a town, and then maybe a few years later, maybe another road, but there wouldn't be a whole lot at once. And there would be several outs on it. What we said was that it would only apply where there's a public easement and where there's a residence on that public easement and where that residence is taxed as a residence and where the town granted building permits. If you don't have all of those things fulfilled, then it wouldn't apply, but it would be mandatory where that does happen. And this is where my husband gets really irate because it's been 53 years for him now on this road. And the town has repeatedly kind of bulldozed us under. You know, everybody gets to use it. We can use it for free, but we're not going to lift a finger to maintain it.
Okay, Roberta, how far did you get in that process? Was there an actual draft presented to the legislature? And if so, could you send us a copy?
Yeah.
Or send it to Heather, and Heather will get it to all of us?
Yeah. So when we first put in our idea, the legislative drafting people didn't understand what we were trying to do, and they came out with something that completely was not what we wanted. And we had to get back in touch with them and say, no, that wasn't what we were looking for. And so they tried again and came closer. And I think what they did was I'm thinking did they put it in under section 3652 maybe? I'm not sure.
Well, if you could share that with us, what they
I'll
proposed.
have to find it. I don't have it right at my fingertips, but.
That might help us and at least give us some ideas to work from.
Yeah. There are some other things that I think could be done that would help the situation besides going this route. One is under Title 23, Section 3026A, the discontinued statute. It does say that it can be used for discontinuing a public easement, but then it doesn't give any detail as to how to do that. And I think that's a function that could be used a lot better if it had some slight amendments to it. One would be to just make it clear that it does apply to public easements as well as to discontinuance of townways. Another is to say that the public easement can be discontinued at any time. It doesn't have to be done at the time of the discontinuance of the townway, because it's a little unclear on that at the moment, the way it's currently worded.
Do we really want to go down that road when we're talking about the idea of the public option to maintain a public easement to a specified level of maintenance?
Well, the reason that they need to maintain it to a specified level is because they're keeping the public easement. And this would give them another option if they don't want to have to provide that maintenance, is they could discontinue the public easement, make it into a shared private easement for the abutters, and then there wouldn't be that conflict of public use of a privately maintained road, which really is the biggest boondoggle.
Well, it can be done now under state law, but as you know, it doesn't.
Yeah, it can, but it's seldom used, and I think a lot of it is because people don't know that it's available, and it's kind of unclear, and the process is cumbersome because it says that you have to wait a year before. After you've notified the landowners, then you have to wait a year before anything can happen. And if the landowners have already gotten together and said, look, this is what we want, there should be some shorter method by which you can say, okay, there's no problem of anybody being landlocked here because they're all ready to agree to a shared easement. So let's just do it, get it done. The other thing that would need to be done is that if they can't agree on the whole road, if they can agree on part of the road, that should be an option, particularly if it's an inner portion. So usually the ones that don't want to agree are the ones who have other access because they have frontage on the main road and frontage on the discontinued road. And they don't see any reason why they should grant somebody a private easement. But if the people further in want that private easement, they should be able to do it because it won't affect those first two.
Okay, so what we're saying is if there's a problem with people not having maintenance on their way, on their public easement, folks who have a residence out there, and then there are two ways that they can go. They could either ask the municipality to utilize this option to give them some minimum level of maintenance as a guarantee, so that it isn't an annual thing where they have to go plead their case in front of town meeting. Or they say, well, if you don't want to fix the public easement, get rid of it. And but the legislature is not going to want people to be left out in the dark. They would want probably that there would have to be, as a condition of that discontinuance of the public easement, a private easement to maintain the road. So it's saying one of the two options. If you guys want you can ask the town, but the town says, "Yet we're not going to take care of this. We're not going to take it to town meeting. We're not going to use this option. We don't want to bind ourselves. We're in Fayette on Roberta's Road, and we're not going to do it." Then you could petition or move to have the road public easement discontinued. And there would have to be a process with that to get the neighbors to talk about a private easement to share the road, so that no one will be landlocked and everyone will have some level of maintenance. So is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, you already have that process under 3026A, but it's not clear that it can be used at any time. It sounds like it can only be used when you're discontinuing the town way.
Great. Okay, I've spoken enough. Other ideas, thoughts, comments?
The only thing that I would just mention with Roberta's comment about the towns not supporting doing it, I think you're right, Roberta. If you put a mandate in there, MMA will come out in full force to kill it. But what if there's at least language in there that allows for direct petition by the voters to the legislative body? And I know that still doesn't guarantee a yes vote, but at least bypasses the municipal officials who may be a deterrent to getting the thing approved.
Well, you already have the right by petition to get to force an article to be on the town warrant.
Right.
But it means getting 10% of the voters who voted in the last gubernatorial election.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's possible and sometimes it isn't.
But I'm talking about if we had language in the bill that addresses specifically minimum maintenance roads. Sometimes when you have a statute that is specific to the issue at hand, the process might be very similar to what you're talking about, but whenever it's specific to the statute that you want something to happen, sometimes the voters are more willing to understand that, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but can be less confrontational at town meeting. Just my experience, but that's just one.
So it could be by, we would set it up right now, would be someone who lives on the road or owns property on the road. The residents could come in and request. We could say by that request or by petition, voter petition. So it could be at the initiative of the select board. The select board may say, no skin off our nose, we'll bring this in front of the voters. Great. Or it could be folks who live along the road request it. It goes to the voters. Or there's a petition of the voters. Now, the petition route, I appreciate it's always there. In some towns, it's going to be, hey, why do I want to increase my taxes to take care of Roberta's Road? I'm not signing this petition. So that might be a little difficult, but it is an option to get something on the warrant, so why not mention it? Okay.
That's where I like to say, if you don't want to maintain it, why are you keeping it? If you have a legitimate reason for having that road be a public easement, why aren't you willing to maintain it?
Because we want the public to have a right to go over it, Roberta, and give you, who doesn't have an easement, an ability to get to your house.
But you could give me a private easement and then the public wouldn't be using it too, and that would solve that part of the problem.
Well, I can't give you a private easement if there's still a public access right over it as a public easement, so that would have to be discontinued. And the idea here is that in the price for getting that discontinuance of the public easement is that there has to be a private easement in place in order to allow that to happen.
Right. And what I'm saying is, if the private landowners are willing to do that, why should the town be able to say, oh, that's great, you all got together and deeded each other private easements, but no, we're keeping the public easement anyway because we get to use it for free and you're going to have to maintain it for us. Ha ha.
Well, your road might be the access to the lake.
Only it isn't.
Well, it could, and in that case,
But you see, if it is the access to the lake, then why aren't they willing to contribute some maintenance so that they can use the road?
I will refrain from any comment.
Rights and responsibilities need to go together. If you want a right to use something, you should be responsible enough to pay the cost of using it and not expect somebody else to pay for it for you.
I understand. In some circles, though, that's referred to as frugality. Okay. Yeah, other thoughts?
And of course, one thought I keep coming back to is how is it that somebody has to get permission to sue the state? Is that by private and special legislation, or how does that happen? Because sometimes I think David is a special circumstance. He's been here so long and has done so much and has been so downtrodden for it. It seems like there should be some way to provide him with special relief that might apply even when it doesn't apply to anybody else.
There is a Maine Tort Claims Act which prevents the state from being sued for tort claims, wrongs involving property, for example, or against the individual. And that generally makes the state immune, because way back when it used to be that there was sovereign immunity. You couldn't sue the king, and that held over in American law. You couldn't sue the government. But in 1977, there was a case in front of the state Supreme Court that basically said, the insurance is available in certain areas. In those areas where insurance is available, you can sue the state. You can sue a municipality. But we'll put limits on what that liability is. And that limit's $300,000 for a government agency. And that now has been raised to $400,000. So if you want to sue the state or a town in an area where it might otherwise be immune, or have a cap on liability because you think you're entitled to more, you have to then ask the legislature to put in a bill to allow you to sue the state. That's the long-winded reason for why that happens. So let's say there's a horrible auto accident, somehow the state's involved, and you think that the state police and the state should be held accountable. You should get more than the $400,000 limit for either death of family members or whatever. You would ask the legislature for a special bill to give you permission to sue the state, either where it's immune or where liability's been capped. That's the process. Rarely happens.
That's why we haven't ever done it. It's been tempting for years, but never gotten that far.
I would suggest that it may not seem as critical to a member of the legislature as some other situations. I mean, I know it's important to you, and I don't mean to discount that. But usually you see this in the case of, let's say there's a road death that somebody might claim on DOT, and the family's limited to $400,000 in damages, where the state may be immune. That's where the legislature might have its arm twisted, usually where there's a fatality or severe personal injury. We don't want that on your road. But
we don't either, really, but
I know.
something's got to happen.
Well, let's hope we can come up with some good ideas that will help. And you might need special mediation with the town. I don't know. Other thoughts on this idea of having the option? Does it seem doable?
It sounds good. I don't know if Roberta's situation will ever get unclouded, but I think it could possibly prevent other situations going ahead. I think you've done a good job looking out for the other people, and yours is just a tough one to get around.
Well, I'll work this up, and I'll look forward, Roberta, to what you had offered as suggestions for maintenance and with regard to the qualifications to be able to get this relief, that you receive the building permit, that you know, that it's your year-round residence. Let's take a look at that and see if we can beef this up and get this before the commission in general to see if we can get a positive read from everyone and include it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, another thing that I was going to mention about it, one of the objections that I can see towns having is that they'll say that these roads haven't been maintained in so long that they're not plowable. There are rocks sticking out of them, or they're too rough, they'd be hard on the equipment. And I'm going to sound like I'm arguing both sides in the middle, but I kind of have to because of the position that I'm in here. I have to advocate for our own situation here, but I also have to advocate for all the other people across the state. And I think if the snow removal was an option, but not necessarily mandatory, more towns might go for it. What I had in mind when I first mentioned snow removal was only if it gets to where the road is too narrow that emergency vehicles can't get in, just come in with the wing plow. And they might not even have to drop their front plow. They could just take the wing plow and push the sides back. Then that might eliminate some of the concern about the condition of the road underneath.
Yeah, if that presupposes that somebody
I can just think we can't do that.
Yeah, but that presupposes somebody can get by and create a
What's that?
That assumes somebody can get by and create at least a narrow path. And so somebody's going to have to be maintaining it anyway.
Yeah, that's another thing that comes into it is liability for somebody, for a private person plowing a public easement. The courts have said that the abutters have a right to maintain it. And of course, we're already looking at liability for that. But in a lot of these cases, should there be a posting at the entrance to the road? This kind of ties into the closed to winter maintenance bit, where if there's a road that's closed to winter maintenance, but it's still a town way, they will say, no, the private individuals can't plow it because that raises liability issues of private plowing of a public road. But how's that any different from private plowing of a public easement? It's still a public road.
Well,
Okay.
Yeah, but the worry is that the municipality is liable for the town way under the Highway Defect Act and under the Tort Claims Act. But we're specifically saying in this legislation that it's not liable for that. So in that case, I don't care if David goes out and runs a single plow down this public easement where it's a minimum maintenance road, because town's not liable. So if David did a shoddy job and someone sues, he wouldn't do a shoddy job, you know what I mean. But if he didn't do a less than stellar job and somebody sued, there would be the protections under the act that we've just prepared for doing work on public easement, and the town wouldn't be liable here, so it would have no reason to stop someone from doing that, except maybe to keep David from making it harder for the town to maintain.
Can we extend that protection to roads that are closed to winter maintenance?
No, because it's a town way.
But can't you post a sign at the beginning of it saying road not maintained in the winter?
Some towns probably do that, close to winter maintenance. It's a long enough period of time, up to 10 years on any vote, that I'm sure there are signs.
Well, I know the Kankomegas Highway in New Hampshire used to be closed in the winter, and they put up signs and gates to keep people from using it. But it seems like there should be some way that if a town is going to close a road to winter maintenance and somebody lives on it, either they should be prohibited from closing it to winter maintenance if somebody lives on it, or they should provide some way that that person can plow it themselves and get to it and not have the town be liable. Well,
I don't disagree on the signage, but I think it's beyond our job description. We are the Abandoned and Discontinued Roads Commission and not the Close to Winter Maintenance Roads Commission.
Yeah, I would argue that it amounts to a discontinuance for several months of the year.
Okay, I hear your argument, but let's, I understand. I understand the point, but the reason why there's a distinction is with the public easement, there's no liability, and we're going to just keep with that. So but with the townway there is. So I want to make sure, if I'm the town, that no individual is going to create liability for the town by going out and doing work that they shouldn't be doing. So, all right. Well, this may be a brief meeting, but that's okay. We needed to just check in on this draft and see what changes needed to be made. So I'll look forward to getting the materials from Roberta. They'll go to Heather, who'll get them out to all of us. I'll work up another draft, send it around, and I'm sure there'll be a few tweaks to fine-tune it. But yeah, the goal here is to get this ready to present to the commission for its consideration when we have our next commission meeting. Does that sound good?
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you all. Have a great rest of the afternoon.
And thank you. Yeah. And thank you all for being patient with me monopolizing the meetings. I feel bad about it, but I'd welcome you to jump in there.
Don't worry, if you go too far astray, we'll pull you back.
They'll pull you out of the ditch, Roberta, okay?
Thank you. Good to know that.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank
Well,
you.
there is a chain hitched onto the
All right, good afternoon.